Gators Breakdown episode 110 is ready to go. Florida is moving on from Jim McElwain, as we know, fired on Sunday. Today's Monday. I don't know when you listen to this podcast, it'll be Monday or Tuesday, but we are ready to go here on Gators Breakdown. And as I mentioned, Florida fired Jim McElwain. Now moving on, we got some more notes. We got some more things happening. Now Randy Shannon's interim coach. He had his first press conference, and we'll break it all down here on Gators Breakdown. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. And joining me tonight is Bill Sykes. You can find Bill on Twitter at RealBSykes. Bill, eventful couple days, of course, but we couldn't let another episode slip by us here.
No, and there's just so much going on right now that, we're kind of scrambling, how do we fit all this in? There's so much that people want to know about, and people are messaging us. And so we're going to try to cover some of the things you guys are asking about and some of the things that we're trying to find out ourselves as fans. So, yeah, I think this show was a necessity for sure.
Man, I can honestly say this is probably one of the busiest interaction days I've had on Twitter since I've been on the app.
And I actually had to work last night after the show, and I woke up and I'm like, oh no, look at all these notifications. So if I haven't gotten back with you on your comment, guys, I'm trying to catch up. It's just been one of those days.
And like we said, we love the interaction, but I could hardly keep up today. It was a lot. So hopefully, like Bill said, hopefully I got to most of everybody's comments out there. If not, maybe by some chances answered in this podcast. But we're having fun with it as much as we can with the scenario at Florida. But all in all, and this is not to poke fun at Jim McElwain or anything, but in a way, this situation, Bill, and what we're talking about, it is kind of fun.
Oh, yeah. As far as the moving on and kind of hope springing eternal, is that what you mean?
Well, that and just the interaction and everybody kind of, and then I guess a lot of the interaction is, hope springs eternal. Who's our next guy? Who do we going to get? And just I think it kind of everything kind of culminating is it's kind of keeping it fun.
Yeah, it definitely is, man. This is right now. It's like we're all envisioning the future, and we're envisioning a good future, and I think for good reason, because you look across the landscape right now, and the candidates are being talked about. To me, there's just a bigger pool of quality options than there was last time around, and I really do believe that with Strickland in charge and with who they've got, what they're trying to do, I believe they're going to go out and get a guy that's going to finally make Florida football fun again. And that doesn't mean that they're going to be a national championship repeat winning coach or whatever, but I think that we're going to finally see some offense, and it's going to be just a more enjoyable experience getting the program going right.
That's right. Before we dive in here, remember, you can find all your Gators Breakdown episodes, past, present, and future, on SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. Search on those sites to get the links by following Gators Breakdown on Twitter and on Facebook at Gators Breakdown. And when you're on iTunes, please rate and review the show. So as I mentioned, Randy Shannon got in front of the media today for the first time as the interim head coach at Florida. And I'm not going to take too much from an interim coach giving his first press conference, but Shannon was smooth in front of the microphone, much more forthcoming to the media. He's going to open up practice some more, so we'll have an idea more of an idea of what's going on around the program. And we'll talk about this later, but the QB battle is open now. And he really called out the special teams unit and needing to get that cleaned up. But he even admitted, and he's right about this, don't expect wholesale changes. It's way too late in the season for that. But now I think we can expect some tendency changes, some tempo, how to spread the ball around on the offense. But, we're not getting a new offense here this far in the season, or at least anything too drastic, unless it's Zaire running the ball from the quarterback position. And like I said, we'll talk more about that. But going back to the special teams, Bill, and this is something I really took away from it. Quote, "We've got to do a better job of special teams," Shannon said. "Big emphasis this week in special teams. We have to get field position. We have to get field position on our punt return team and also our kickoff return team. We have to do a tremendous job of getting the offense not 80 yards to make it, 60 or 50 yards to give us more of a chance. Those will be the biggest emphasis this week on what we're trying to get done." Now, see, to me, this is big, and we've talked about this before, but this is big for a struggling offense. You have a great kicker. You have a great punter, but the offense is constantly in such bad field position that they can't take advantage of Townsend and Pinedo. So it's it's a weird scenario having these good special teams, but it's hard for Johnny Townsend to pin an offense deep because you know what, Florida's not in good field position. I mean, we haven't seen a lot of field goal attempts by Eddie Pinedo because the offense can't get into field goal range. So what can they help? And I like Darius Lemons at kick returner. I think he can get better there, but I like what I've seen and I like a little potential there. But you know, they can use some help. Whichever way this offense can get some help, I think it can start with the special teams.
I think so too, man. Great football teams, especially at Florida, have been marked by good special teams. I mean, Urban Meyer was known for it. I mean, you look at 2006 when they were blocking kicks to beat South Carolina. What was it, 3 that night? Some of that does come through recruiting. Having that quality depth where your reserves are out there fighting first spot at the gunner and what have you, and it does make a difference. And sure, maybe you could make the case that if Florida hadn't had the suspensions they did or the injuries, that maybe they'd have a few extra guys out there. But just like everything else, it's been a spot of regression. And so I think that Shannon, being the veteran coach he is, the good coach that he is going to go back to the drawing board on that this week and say, well, this is probably one thing where we can energize the team. They're going to probably put a little more emphasis on it in practice. They're going to find some dogs out there, some young guys that want to make a mark. And, because don't forget, this is a chance for everybody to start over. Those guys that were frustrated on the team, that were buried on the depth chart, those guys that felt they weren't getting a fair shake. And we heard that was a thing on this team. They're going to get their shot now. And Shannon is a different personality. He's a different individual. He's going to have his own kind of list of the guys that he thinks he can trust and the guys he can't. I think there's going to be an opportunity for a shakeup, for some young guys to make their mark. And maybe that's one area I could imagine some rapid improvement over the past next few weeks of the season.
Yeah, and kind of going back to what you just said, some new guys here can prove themselves, and I think coaches as well. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But our friend Thomas Skullcamp from GatorBait.net had a really funny tweet. He goes, this kind of goes to my next point. He goes, "What if after all this, we see the offense take off under Doug Nussmeier?" so we'll see what happens here. I kind of going to the point now. Are these coaches now looser? Can they be looser under Shannon than they were under Mac? Did Mac have did he have his hands too much on these coaches, or could these coaches be themselves? Chris Rumpf now has been promoted to defensive coordinator. As Shannon says, he'll oversee the entire team, and that's where he needs to be involved there. And I don't think we know enough about Rumpf to know what kind of type of defensive coordinator he'll be, and if we can expect tendency changes here or there with him. I don't know if he'll, I'm sure Randy Shannon will have the game plan of the defense. Will we see more aggressive? Will we see more blitzing? And I think if you go back and look at that Georgia game, I think we might have seen some reasons why Florida doesn't blitz. They got 8 up on it a couple of times when they brought the pressure, especially on that one, I believe, Sony Michel run where Vasson Joseph just ran right by him. Didn't even touch him, and he ran right by another long run touchdown for Michel. I think we don't know enough about Chris Rumpf and being the defensive line coach as now transitioning to a defensive coordinator. I think it's a good shot for him to kind of see where he's at that part of his career now.
Yeah, while you're talking about it, I couldn't help it. I'm envisioning the headlines of like Shannon and Nussmeier becoming co-coaches, and they can call it Doug and Randy Ball. That is not happening. Neither one of these guys is going to be the head coach. We got people in the live chat right now saying that. I really just do not. I think Shannon's a good coach, and I think he's probably got he's going to get another shot, I think, eventually as a head coach. That's just not going to happen. They're not going to pull an Orgeron here.
No.
But no, you're right. I mean, this is the opportunity for the staff, and we're going to find out with the constraints of McElwain's regime and his control and authority lifted off. These coaches are, they have disagreements, as any staff would, as they're going through, preparation and the execution of the plan and all these things where they're going to be like, man, I wish we were doing it this way. And so now Shannon, I'm sure, is going to go back to the drawing board. And in this situation, you have to think he's going to have to put a great deal of trust in Nussmeier. He hasn't had his hand in the offense at all. So we're going to see both these guys kind of spread their wings a little bit and show us the way they would have done it.
Yeah, and it was I tweeted it out yesterday. Pat Dooley was on 1010XL here in Jacksonville. He was talking to Frank Frangie, and something really caught my I think it caught everybody that was listening. it caught their attention that Pat Dooley said Doug Nussmeier has wanted to play Malik Zaire the last few weeks and wasn't able to do so. And then Frank Frangie quickly rebutted that and said he had heard the opposite. So, where do we go from there? To me, it bears talking about. I mean, once they didn't really agree on the sources. One source said one thing, another source said the other thing. But if that is true, I mean, that changes a lot in what we think about Jim McElwain. And I don't think it changes a lot of perception of Jim McElwain or Doug Nussmeier. But, if that is something and Doug Nussmeier was the one that was willing to change, willing to try something different, then that, to me, kind of changes the narrative for these next few games.
It does. And as far as the quarterback position is concerned, I think it's the one where it's the obvious, easy change that could yield the biggest benefit right away. The one that could shake everything up. And, just a little side note, I don't want to call myself a defender of Felipe Franks. And I understand what people are seeing when
people will call me that, and I'll follow it up in a minute.
Yeah, and dude, he struggles, man. He has struggled. Yes, you're right. And maybe fans are right, and when they say, well, his vision or this or that, the other, reading progressions is struggle, he's just not going to get it. That may be. The reason I've defended the guy is not to suggest that otherwise, it's to suggest that why do they keep throwing him to the wolves over and over and over to watch him fail when you've got other options there? It just felt like they were trying to force it and just expecting him at any minute to start blossoming, and it's just not happening. So it really wouldn't shock me at all to see any quarterback on the roster at this point. And, yeah, I know you could make the case that, Allen, probably they don't want to burn his red shirt at this late stage for meaningless games. So unless he has been far better than we've heard in practice, and I haven't heard that he's bad, I just haven't heard much about him lately, unless they think he is the future, and even then – you probably don't want to make that decision for the next coach that's going to be there.
Right. Yeah.
And, so other than him, I think you could see just about anybody, like maybe Trask or Zaire. And it wouldn't shock me at all if Zaire started the game. Yeah.
Trask not fully healthy, by the way, yet still. So he was in a boot as of a couple weeks ago.
So was the offense, Dave.
But yeah, going back to Felipe Franks, Malik Zaire kind of thing, it was only me saying more about Franks because of I didn't think Jim McElwain was getting fired, so I think they were giving him the season and giving him as much tape and as much film as possible to break down as the season went on, or as the season ended to feed into next year. See his tendencies, study his own. Study his own film, but there's enough out there now to where we know what Felipe Franks is. We know the problems. We know what he needs help with. We know what coaches can help him with. So, and with the way the season has played out, and going back to, just the last few weeks, I think we can, I think we can move on and feel safe about moving on from Felipe Franks now. And I know I was kind of one of the late ones about that, but I did post a Twitter poll about that, and most people were still wanting to see Felipe Franks. But I think after the Georgia game and after the firing of Jim McElwain, that I don't think first of all, I don't think it really matters now. Now I think I think for the team maybe, and for the rest of the offense, they may want to see something different. This may be a spark. This may, hey, let's just see, can we help ourselves here? Can we, if Zaire comes in, does the run game open up a little more because he's more of a run threat? And that was one big reason, because I don't think Doug Nussmeier caters to the talent very well, and that was another reason I wanted Felipe Franks in there. But it is what it is now, and maybe Doug Nussmeier can come along, and we saw a little more zone read. We saw some read option in the fourth quarter of the Georgia game. Now, granted, that was what it is, what it was. It was a blowout at the time, but I have no problem now moving on. Go ahead and one thing I noticed, and one thing I was looking at the Georgia game when the team was coming out, Malik Zaire was one of the first guys out. He was all the players came out of the tunnel. They were clapping his hands. He was there in front, getting a hand clap from every player. So I still like his attitude. He's still involved. You see him on the sideline. So I think as far as I'm concerned, I don't think it really matters. What happens. But I think for the team, for some kind of spark, maybe it would be beneficial just to go ahead and let Zaire go ahead and finish this season out.
Yeah, I'm mixed on that, man, because like we said, the constraints are coming off. Mac's influence is coming off. And so what if they have a whole new set of plays they want Franks to run? What if they do like let him use his legs in his own read game, or just to design bootlegs to kind of give a spark there? And what if they do have some different route trees and different concepts and are able to generate a little something? We might see some development there that could give him some confidence going into the next regime.
Yeah.
And then again, I feel like these players and the fans deserve for something good to happen at the end of the year. And if Zaire, even though he's not going to be the long-term answer, can salvage a bad situation and help them to get a win or two, especially like over FSU, then man, you kind of have to see that. Yeah. I mean, don't you think? I mean, wouldn't you like to see it go? So I kind of feel like he should have been in there several times already.
Yeah.
So I think we could see him. And heck, we might even see Tony get a little more Wildcat action back there. Who knows?
Yeah. And I've thought more about Tony, and we'll talk about this later, of course, because we're going to talk about some more potential coaching candidates. But I've thought more and more about Tony according to who the next coach could be. So, kind of a little tease there. If you go get a spread quarterback or a good spread coach like Scott Frost or whatever, like I said, we'll talk more about this, but not to really get off tangent. But since we were on Tony, maybe there are some inklings there where you can see that he can be that type of quarterback. And if you get a spread option guy, there you go. You might have your quarterback from a guy who was a quarterback in high school.
Yeah, that's interesting. We talked early on in the season about how the elements of the offense that looked good were those that kind of mimicked the spread. When Tony was back there and, letting Malik Davis kind of get outside in the zone schemes and kind of find a crease. So, yeah, what if he's the guy that, maybe not long term, but, if they bring in a guy that wants to run some spread option, he could be at least a short term answer there.
Well, and you just brought up a good point, because I do remember us talking about that, and you were a big proponent of, hey, look, we've seen some spread elements. We've seen Tony in the backfield in the Wildcat and Davis running, wide plays for that play against Tennessee where they moved him in motion, got a handoff. He takes it 70-something yards, but fumbles, but whatever. But you're right. You could see, I really think with Zaire and Tony, you could see more of a zone option offense, even for what we've seen this staff so far. We've seen inklings of it. We've seen bits and pieces of it. Now, do you maybe build a game plan around it?
Yeah, you might, and it's very possible. So I'm very interested to see. Like I said, I want them to just go wild. Just score some points, win some ball games, and let's take it to the house at the end of the season and start over with a new coach.
Yeah, for sure. But there's plenty of ways to go with this. And we talked about what you could do at quarterback with Zaire and Franks, whatever. But one big guy they won't have. I know kind of got lost in the shuffle with Jim McElwain. Getting fired here is the running back Malik Davis, true freshman. We know will be lost for the rest of the season. Injury in the Georgia game, first quarter of that game, I believe. 79 attempts for the year, 526 yards, 6.7 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns. And Bill, what the run game's missing here is the home run threat. I think that's what Davis brought that the other guys didn't bring. Yes, you had guys like P. Ryan and Scarlett in the past and Thompson who were chunk yardage guys, but it was hard to break the home run threat, and Davis gave that threat. So now his fellow true freshman, Darius Lemons, now he'll get even more playing time and building off of the opportunity he had against Georgia. So I don't know, if it changes with him at kick return now. Now you have a running back he'll be your third running back, a guy you'll have to count on to get some carries now. But Malik Davis out for the season. Darius Lemons will now get some more carries. But I really think this is, for an offense that's struggling, just another hit.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, Davis, he had 526 yards. And that doesn't sound like a lot. And that was on 79 attempts. So he had a great per carry average at 6.7 with a long of 74. But when you actually break down game by game and you take out the Michigan game where they just didn't give him any touches, he got 1 touch for 8 yards and they never went back to him. And then you take out the Georgia game where he only had 4 touches, was averaging 5 yards a carry against a very good defense before he got hurt. Well, across those other games, I think he was averaging about 99.7 yards a game. That's good. That's very good. That's what Florida needs. And so he's a player that, yes, they're going to miss, but he's also a player that when he gets back under the new regime, whatever the offense may be, I think they can build around him.
Yeah, so if he comes back fully healthy and with that. But that's right. But even when he went down, hey, and you mentioned how good that Georgia defense was, and they're very legit. I mean, I was impressed with the run game still in what we saw against Georgia and Michael P. Ryan. I really thought they put a good performance together. And I said going into the Georgia game, it may not work. Because for the rest of the season, I wanted about a 70-30 run-heavy offense. I didn't think they would be able to run on Georgia the way they did, but they did. So if Florida had some better quarterback play, they had their chances even after they were down 21-0. But because of this run game really surprised me with how well they could run on Georgia.
Yeah, it did surprise me a little bit, but I think they are improving a little bit in the offensive line. They got a good stable of backs. I think Juwan Sider has been a huge addition there, and I know we're going to kind of get into who might be back in as far as the coaching staff is concerned, but the run game has been better. It's just this darn quarterback position,
Think about how much better they could be. They have to face stack box after stack box.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you're never going to have some dominant running game if the other team knows you can't throw the ball. I mean, maybe against the lesser teams, but not against the better defenses. It's just not going to happen.
That's right. Bill, anything else before we dive into these potential next coaching candidates here?
We're going to talk about who might be back on the current staff.
You want to do that now?
Well, if you want, but no big deal. We got so much going on right now.
Yeah. So the Twitter question was sent in by GatorPest, at GatorPest on Twitter. Any idea who might be retained on the current staff? And we'll go ahead and hit this. And that kind of good segue. So here we go. Yeah. Any idea who might be retained on the current staff and a realistic date for the new hire? So we'll go ahead and hit on the who might be retained for the current staff. I think the obvious, Brad Davis, offensive line coach, and Juwan Sider, running backs coach. I think those two, if recruits love them for one thing already. They made an instant impact in the recruiting world already for Florida. And we just talked about the run game, and I don't think it's a coincidence that those guys are on staff and the offensive line has started to look better. The run game looks really good with a true freshman. That was led by a true freshman, and the Michael P. Ryan looks good as well. I just think those guys already in one short year have a reputation that they need to be retained on the staff. But you make a hire, a coach is going to want to bring his own guys in. But you can have coaches who have no affiliation with the state of Florida much and would need as much help as they can get. So that could play into here. Or you have guys who are already in the state of Florida and they know how good these guys are and they know they can't get rid of them. So I would think after being here a year, you would think Sider and Davis would want to stay. Davis has tweeted all day on Monday about how happy he is to be a Gator on this Gator coaching staff. So I would have to think Davis and Sider are shoe-ins, and we can go down the list after that.
Yeah, I think that those are the obvious two for me. I think it depends on who they hire, of course. Because if you bring in like Mike Norvell from Memphis, their offensive line coaches was a Ryan Silverfield, who was thought to be a strong candidate for the job when Davis got it.
Right.
But then again, maybe they slide Silverfield out to become the tight ends coach or something like that, or tackles and tight ends.
And don't forget, you got that extra coaching.
Right, you got an extra slot, so maybe you let one of them focus on special teams or something like that. And as a matter of fact, while we're looking, I'll kind of find out if Ryan Silverfield has done that. But yeah, I definitely think Juwan Sider, you got to keep that guy for recruiting continuity. He is a legit dog on the recruiting trail. He's a Florida guy. He's one of those few in the country I think should be on just about any staff should want that guy. So he would be my bridge the gap continuity guy. Hopefully he becomes a long-term fixture. I think it's very possible he could end up with a coordinator title, like run game coordinator. I know he was involved in that aspect of the game and has brought some things there, especially when he was at West Virginia. I think Shannon is a guy that, I've heard from a few places that a younger head coach might be encouraged to keep in an associate head coach role. They like, how he represents the university. Not necessarily as a defensive coordinator. Now, I don't know that he would want to be associate head coach and linebackers coach. Personally, I think I would prefer to see a new coach bring in his own defensive coordinator, as much as I do think of Shannon as a person, as a coach. And it's hard to believe that they're going to have 3 or 4 guys retained. So for me, I'm thinking Sider and maybe Davis. Davis, the one benefit to him is they've got a pretty good offensive line class right now. In addition to just being a good coach, I don't mean to say the only benefit, but it also might help out in solidifying this offensive line class they're building.
Yeah, and I quickly just scanned through Silverfield's thing. It looks like really just offensive line. There was a little bit of running back stuff in there and an offensive analyst, but it really does look like mostly just offensive line. So,
yeah. So who knows? Maybe they find somebody else to do it. But I think it's a good chance if they went with Norvell, which I think is a strong possibility, that he could come in as an offensive line coach.
Yeah, because Skipper, who's been known as a really good recruiter this past half, he is a Mac guy. He came with McElwain from Colorado State. So, we can see. But here's another thing. You don't see it too often when a new coach comes in. They don't keep a lot of the previous staff in. Hey, look, there was a reason you were bad in the first place, and there was a reason that head coach was fired in the first place, and a lot of that kind of translate to assistants as well, fair or unfair. But I think after only being here a year, I think Sider and Davis are definitely are 2 guys that should be looked at as being kept around. But I do kind of buy into that thought of. And look, we've talked about this Florida staff and the weak links there. We all, Greg Nord is a popular name that's brought up that, a lot of people don't think he should be on the staff. Dixon at wide receivers coach as well. Those are names. Nussmeier, of course. There's no way he's staying on board, especially you would think a new guys coming in with his offense. There's absolutely no way that's happening. But I think the 2 names that we brought up are pretty much the only 2 guys that I think have a better than half chance of staying.
Yeah, I think they'll mostly clean house, and I wish those guys well wherever they go. And again, I'm going to say Sider is the guy for me.
Yeah. And that's another thing about this coaching situation that's bad. A lot of we've got to know these coaches too, and that's the side of it that is kind of bad. These guys have families too, and kids in school and all that. But they know that when they get into it.
Yeah, that's right, man. That's the business. That's why they make a lot of money.
Exactly. So, Bill, I know this is what you've kind of been waiting on here on this episode of Gators Breakdown, and kind of breaking down some potential candidates, or not potential candidates, I guess, for the job, and maybe the next potential hires for these Gators. So, we got a list of names here, and I'll kind of start. Anybody you want to start with, Bill?
I want to address the Willie Taggart rumors.
There you go, because that did seem to be the hot name of the day on this Monday. So whenever you listen to this podcast, this is the early week version. So, you may listen to it Monday, Tuesday, or whatever. But Taggart's name was, kind of, it didn't really get brought up over the weekend when kind of the initial list came out, but it was a name that really picked up steam on Monday.
Yeah, it was. There were several media outlets running stories saying he could be linked, and there was a South Florida sports agent, I can't remember his name, that tweeted out that he was a possible candidate and that boosters were talking to him. And tonight I wanted to kind of give a few stats on this and some points of why, number one, why I think he could be the perfect guy for the job, and also why I think it absolutely will not happen and probably shouldn't happen.
All right. Yeah. So I think the reasons, the good reasons are obvious. Just leaving to go to Oregon from USF, where they had a prolific offense, and one Charlie Strong has been able to take advantage of in his first year at South Florida. It has a history in the state of Florida, but those are just broad strokes of why he could fit in here at Florida. What you got, Bill, for one reason, or not one reason, but reasons why he would be a good fit in Gainesville?
Well, he does have extensive experience in the state of Florida. He's from the state of Florida, played high school ball there. I believe he was from Bradenton, and so I think he would make a huge impact along that west coast of Florida in the Tampa area as far as recruiting. And really, recruiting is the thing. I'm just going to cut right to it. The reason I think he could overwhelm the state's recruiting picture like Urban Meyer did. I mean, when you consider his connections to the state, when you consider his experience in the state, the classes that he put together, at Oregon so far had the number 19 class in his transition year, which is tremendous, and then for them. And then now he's currently got the number 6 class in the nation. That was number 3 his first year in the Pac-10 or Pac-12, whatever they are now. And now he's currently got the best class in the Pac-12. And if you look back at what he did at USF, now I didn't count 2016 because that's the year he departed. And I didn't have time to analyze when players decommitted or whatever. But in 2013, 2014, and 2015, they had the number 1 class in their conference. So he is a tremendous recruiter, obviously. In addition to that, he could help to bridge the gap in transition recruiting because he's currently got 4 guys, including defensive lineman Malcolm Lamar, who the Gators have coveted, that are from the state of Florida committed to Oregon. So they were going to fly all the way across the country to play football. And if their coach, who was from Florida, that they trust and they gave their pledge to, was to come back, you're talking about adding, I believe 3 of those guys are 4 stars, including a wide receiver. To have a nice little nucleus of guys that he knows, that he recruited, that would fit his system to stay right. I guarantee you at least 2 or 3 of those guys would follow him to come back. And
they
yeah, that'd be a huge boost to the class.
I mean, you got to pretty much think he's the reason they're going out there in the first place.
And I don't say this as a jab or a negative. I want people to understand this, but I believe his floor at Florida is a Ron Zook. I believe that he could load the rosters, and even if he, fizzled out after year 3, 4, or 5, then he probably leaves the next guy set up. And as tempting as that is, and as much as I said last night, and I've said online a few times, the number one thing I need is a guy that is a capable recruiter. We want to see a guy that's going to load the coffers. So, like I said, even if he doesn't make it, the next guy will. But I don't think he's the guy. I don't think that I cannot imagine him getting a finalist look for a few reasons. And I know you had one of them with a scandal.
Yeah, when the players workout scandal, they had 3 players that were admitted to hospital. They had kidney problems as well, and there were some reports out there. And I know, they're probably, Florida's going to do their due diligence in that story when those guys were, because you know how it is now, with concussion protocol and all that, and the health of players, and that's definitely going to come up of safety of players. And I remember that was a big story when he first got to Oregon. I believe it was in their first spring when that happened. So of course there's a way of going about toughness and instilling it. So like I said, I think Florida would do their research and talk to him about the whole situation. Did he know? Was it the strength and conditioning coach who more to blame? I believe he was fired after that, the strength and conditioning coach. But, when you're the head coach, something that serious in a way ultimately falls on you. Now, Oregon didn't think it was serious enough to fire him. They had just hired him on, we'll see what kind of goes there or what went on there. So, I think he's okay in that regard. I think if it was serious enough, he wouldn't be at Oregon either. But I do think it's something the UAA boosters and Scott Strickland would dig in and find more about.
That's right. And I do think this is the least of about 3 things why I think he won't be the coach. And this might seem tedious, and we all know the context of the Jim McElwain situation, but how do you fire a guy with cause for not properly handling a situation that affected the possible safety of his players, and then turn around and hire a guy who less than a year ago had a scandal about the safety of his players? So it would just ring a ring of hypocrisy there, and so I don't see it. A little more of an issue to me, before I get to the big heavy hitter here, is that he's got a losing record as a head coach. He's 45-49. He's first was at Western Kentucky, where he took first year was 2-10, then went to 7-5, then 7-5, which wasn't terrible, I guess, for Western Kentucky. And went to South Florida, was 2-10, was 4-8 the second year, before 8-5 the third year, and 10-2 the fourth year, where they won a conference divisional title. So he's only had one really big season. They're currently 5-4. I think he probably just hasn't proven enough in the long term that he is going to be a multiple location coach that can win big everywhere he goes. He hasn't proven that. But even more than that, when you look at how his offenses have performed, this is the total offense ranking, the pass offense rankings of Willie Taggart's teams as a head coach, starting from 2010 to 2017. 115th, 102nd, 90th, 108th, 95th, 95th, crescendoed at 70th in 2016, and then now he's 94th in passing at Oregon. Mm-hmm. I cannot imagine that Scott Strickland, after stepping to the podium and talking about how he wanted to make Florida football fun again, is going to risk on a guy who, while he has had some good offenses, now don't get me wrong, they're 36 right now in total offense at Oregon. They were 11th last year in his best year at USF in total offense, and they were 5th in rushing offense and even 4th in scoring offense. But it's really hard for me to accept that Strickland is going to go hire a guy that doesn't like to air it out. He might hire an option guy, but he's going to be looking for at least balance. And Taggart's offenses are so run heavy, I just don't see it. To me, that is the deal breaker. I just don't think he's a fit.
Yeah, you bring up some good points there, and I know a lot of people, when I brought up that I was higher on him than I originally was, he's not at the top of my list by any means. But there were his overall record, and like you said, that's kind of in the way you explained it there. His overall record was the big deterrent, and I understand some of the situations at Western Kentucky, trying to get that program from middling levels and building them up, and now his first year at Oregon, because we know how bad they were last year, and trying to get that program turned around in the Oregon that we know. So, definitely something to take a look at there when dealing with Willie Taggart, a name who has shot up the list and just one day removed after Jim McElwain's firing. Bill, who you got next?
Let's see. Who do we have next, Dave? What about Dan Mullen? What do you think? And we talked a little bit last night about the benefits and the negatives. Do you think, here's my question for you,
okay,
that Florida goes after the 14th highest paid coach in the nation, who's already making $4.5 million with an undisclosed buyout, and can do enough, and I don't mean that as a knock on Florida, or would even want to do enough, because you're probably going to have to make him a top 10 highest paid coach, Dan Mullen. Do they do that? Do they attempt to go that route?
Well, one advantage Florida has is the AD, who knows him better than anybody. Right. So if they do that, but just given the parameters that you just gave, that Scott Strickland has the utmost confidence that he is the guy. If he goes out and gives the guy the money and has to come to Florida, where the pressure, what you have to do, you got to develop a quarterback, you got to get this offense turned around, you probably got to get it turned around pretty fast. If Dan Mullen is the guy, that lets me know Scott Strickland, it checked off it's going to, a candidate's going to have to check off every check box anyway. But it just probably lets me know, as much as he knows about Dan Mullen and the parameters you just laid out about the whole money situation and probably having to make him a top 10 paid coach, is he worth that? That's going to be a question that's going to be asked. And to me, only Scott Strickland can answer that by how well he knows him. So if he is the guy, that lets me know Scott Strickland is very confident that he can be the guy to lead the turnaround.
Yeah, and keep in mind, these are your top 10 paid coaches as far as what I found online was Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney, Harbaugh, Meyer, Rich Rodriguez, Jimbo Fisher, David Shaw, Tom Herman, Gary Patterson, and Kevin Sumlin. And those, obviously, there's some mixed results, and some of those are being probably overpaid and underpaid. But is he that kind of candidate? And like you said, I think that Strickland certainly knows him, better than anybody out there. He's better qualified to evaluate him than anybody. But, yeah, he's going to have to check off every single box. He's going to have to say, you know what, I've worked with this guy. I know there's been some friction and there's been rumors of our relationship, but I'm telling you right now, this is a national championship winning coach, because you're going to be paying him like one. And personally, I think it's possible, but I'd say 70-30 no.
70-30 no that he won't be hired.
I just
or should it be?
Well, I don't want to say that, because he knows. I'd say as a quarterback developer, sure. And he has done a lot, man. I understand why people want him. I just haven't ever heard as we've been getting information on this, we haven't heard that they're looking to spend a lot of money here. And this is a lot of money, and we really don't even know what the buyout is. He just seems like a little out of reach to me.
Yeah.
And a little bit of still of an unknown because of the Mississippi State factor and his record and the things like that.
Yeah, well, given that, I think he's done as well as anybody can do at Mississippi State.
Sure. Tremendous job.
Yeah, that's a graveyard there, and he's done more at that job than the previous guys have done combined. So,
Yep.
I did go back. There was something that was posted. It was an interview with his wife, and she does not like Gainesville, Florida, by the way. The quote was something along the lines of, at Mississippi State, they're happy whether we win or lose. Well, not really. That's just because you've been the best coach they've had. Let it go south for a couple seasons and you'll figure out what happens.
Yep.
But, she said she worked for the Golf Channel in Orlando, and she would make sure she got groceries in Orlando because she did not want to go to the grocery store in Gainesville because they would complain about not scoring 42 points, and it was horrible. So, so if he has to consult the wife and make the family happy, it doesn't sound like Mrs. Mullen would be ready for a return trip to Gainesville.
Yeah, that'd be a little awkward too. That is not, because that's going to be in every newspaper, to start things off. I mean, that's almost like some kind of weird inverse Clarabelle moment to start things off. I don't know. To me, it seems like a little bit of a stretch, and I think he ends up getting another raise. I think he goes from 4.5 to probably up close to $5 million, and his agent gets it done, and I think the Gators hire somebody else.
Yeah, and he did the admin at Florida, the administration there had a bad taste of it with him anyway too. So
yeah, and do they really want to bring another guy in that they have friction with?
Yeah, right.
I just don't see it.
No, I don't either. I'm letting you run this one, Bill. So who's your next guy?
Let's talk about maybe a little more affordable option that I think might be in reach, and that's Justin Fuente.
He's my number one, by the way.
Yeah, and our good friend Will Miles, that's taking the night off, loves him. He's got a degree from Virginia Tech, and he's done a tremendous job there. Now, this guy, as opposed to Mullen, who has an unknown buyout, makes $4.5 million a year. Fuente's only got a $6 million buyout, according to the article I read, if he leaves in 2017, and of course it goes down from there. And his current salary is only $3.25 million or thereabout. So it's very reasonable to think that Florida could come up with $4.25–4.5 million for their new coach if they feel that, again, he checks off all the boxes. And Fuente is a guy who has, I believe, won a conference championship. And he did a tremendous job building the Memphis program. He's done a tremendous job at Virginia Tech so far. He's a winning coach, 43-28. At Memphis, he started out 4-8, then 3-9. Took a little while, but he finally went 10-3 in 2014 and won the AAC, and then 9-3 2015. Went to Virginia Tech, immediately had a 10-4 season last year. Now he's 7-1. They've been pretty dang good on offense. They have thrown the ball quite a bit. This year, they're 32nd total offense, 29th in scoring, 38th in passing, even top 10 in total defense. But that could be a little bit to do with Bud Foster more than anything else. But he's a good proven option that I think they actually might have a chance to sign if he wants to come.
On that part, Bill, I don't think so.
You don't think he wants to come?
Correct.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you.
Yeah. And maybe if he had been in Virginia Tech a little longer. But I guess, I don't think he will leave Virginia Tech this early. Here's the thing about this that is going to help Florida is and we hit on it a little bit last night, was this McElwain buyout. And
they got money to play with now.
They got money to play with. They're from all the rumors I'm going by for what Brett McMurphy said. Florida's not having to pay that $12.9 million buyout. So they are saving probably, if what he says are true, about $8 million in that whole thing. So, if you go get a guy and you got to pay a buyout, that's really going to help of not having to pay the outgoing coach's buyout there. So, Fuente, he is my number one guy. Being able to build that Memphis program the way he did, the way he stepped into Virginia Tech, they didn't really have a great quarterback on the roster last year. He he found a way to make that guy good. He fit an offense around that guy who he didn't have the best arm, but was mobile, and built an offense around him to have some success in year one. And now we see in year two, he's got him at 7-1, and on their way probably to a second straight ACC championship game. So it's they got a big game against Miami coming up this weekend, so I'm definitely interested to see that against undefeated Miami team.
That's the one, man. That's the one that could launch him, I think, in this whole search and just in public perception.
I agree, and I would think Gator fans may have an eye out there for that game just to kind of see what's going on about that. But it's just the way he was been able to build one program, go to another one that had kind of fallen off, and in year one being able to take that team to a conference championship game and look good doing it.
Yeah, he's a coach, man. I mean, they haven't been what I would call statistically explosive like Frost, who we'll talk about. At either stop he's had, but he's had some very good offenses. So, at 2015 they were 11th in scoring. That one actually is explosive. But they're usually right in that top 25% to 30% of the offenses. And then he's had some good defenses. I think the one knock, and I'm probably even be a little too hard on his offense. I mean, it's pretty dang good. I'm looking at the numbers here. But the recruiting was a little weird at Memphis, and I need to look and see if there was probation or what was going on. But, his first class in 2012, they were 10th in the conference. The next year, they were 11th, then 7th, and he finally got up to the top echelon of the AAC in 2015 when they were 4th in the conference. And we're talking about early on, he was like in 90th and 92nd in the nation with his classes. Now it's looking better at Virginia Tech to where they're actually 4th in the conference with his current class and last year. So not what I would call elite nationally or even in the conference, but they're also going up against some heavy hitters there between Clemson, Florida State, and Miami that have a huge advantage in recruiting over a place like Virginia Tech. There's a big difference in what's going on in Tallahassee talent-wise and Blacksburg. So really, it looks like, I don't know what was going on early, but even that might be in pretty good shape.
So how high would you have him on the list? On your personal
He's
list?
got to be top 3, man. A championship coach, and I don't count divisional titles, but a guy that goes out and wins his conference, because there's a difference. Those are hard to come by, and when you're in a coaching search. And this guy has built 2 programs, or at least, elevated 2 programs is a better way to say it, not built from the ground up.
Yeah.
But he did a great job turning around Memphis. He took over and immediately kind of reinvigorated the Virginia Tech program. And he did win the Coastal division there at the ACC last year, and looks primed that they may win the conference this year. If he does, I mean, what more do you want than a guy who wins 2 different conferences in 2 stops and then looks like he's capable of, coaching up a quarterback?
Yeah, and it's just I think he really likes it there at Virginia Tech, and I think it'd be hard to pull him away.
Yeah, he's probably got to be the number 1 choice, if not number 2.
Yeah. So, next guy.
All right. Well, the one for me, if you can't get him at this point, I think I'm all in with Scott Frost at this point.
Bingo.
Yeah, he's a risk. He's got a very short head coaching career. I think another knock is that, he did come from Oregon, which kind of made a name for itself under Chip Kelly and buzzsawing people until they got destroyed by SEC teams. So we have to wonder, how is that offense going to translate from the AAC to the SEC? That said,
that's what everybody said about Meyer, right?
Offense, yeah, the number 1 scoring offense, and they're averaging, I think, 47.3 or maybe even up to 50 points a game now. I mean, the guy has got the pedigree, which I know you want to talk about. They run just a really fun, wide open offense. They run option. They throw the ball. I don't know if people saw this, but I looked at their actual stat sheet this year.
Yeah.
I think they've got 17 people that have caught passes and 13 that have had carries in their offense.
Whew.
Think about that, man. I mean, I'm looking at this list. It's just huge. And so they're distributing the ball all over the place. They're getting people involved. And, he's recruited excellent. They're 3rd right now in the conference. They were 1st last year. They were 4th the year before that.
Talking about
that's
recruiting,
really good. Yeah, they were first in the conference last year in recruiting, 55th nationally, but it's UCF. I mean, they're not going to be top 25. That's if you're number one in your conference, you're number one in your conference. They are not as up tempo this year, averaging about 25.5 seconds a play. But over the course of his career as a coordinator and as a head coach, they typically average about 22 seconds a play. So it's far more up tempo than Florida has been, where I think Florida's around 29 seconds a play. Just downright explosive, man. All of his offenses, except for his first year at UCF, have been in the top 5 in the nation in scoring, as both a coordinator and a head coach. Think about that for a second. Every year they're one of the top 5 scoring teams in the country, everywhere he's been. That is just tremendous. I think this guy could really be something special.
Yeah, and Joel Klatt had a nice little write-up or video about him late last week before, of course, all this Jim McElwain stuff happened, and talking about how he would be such a good fit at Nebraska and maybe Tennessee. But his background, played at Nebraska and then played DB in the NFL under Bill Parcells, Bill Belichick, and Monty Kiffin. So he went from quarterback at Nebraska to playing defensive back and playing defense under some big names in the NFL. Then he went to be a defensive coordinator at Northern Iowa after the NFL, and then went up to Oregon as a wide receiver coach under Chip Kelly, and then an offensive coordinator at Oregon under Mark Helfrich once Chip Kelly left. And now we've seen what he can do in the 2 short, seasons at Central Florida. And at BOL Gators sent me this on Twitter. It's a graphic posted by UCF that shows the rankings of the offense in various offensive categories. So first in scoring at 50.6 points per game. Number 2 in passing efficiency. Number 2 in completion percentage. 72% of the passes are being completed. 5th in total offense, 547 yards per game, and they've only thrown 2 interceptions all season, and that ranks 7th. So, of course, that's kind of led by – and I went and looked at, because we know, and it's stating the obvious here, the quarterback position at Florida is where this has held this offense back for so long. So, Mackenzie Milton is their quarterback there. His number's right now. 129 completions out of 177 attempts, 1,997 yards, so almost 2,000 yards passing, 72.9, as I mentioned, completion percentage. Yards per attempt, Bill, 11.28 yards per attempt, 19 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, 4 sacks. He's only been sacked 4 times. And if you look at rushing, 43 attempts for 254 yards, averaging about 6 yards a carry there. 2 touchdowns is there. But look, there's something I really, really wanted to look at, and then how slow this Florida offense starts games. And we know they're bad overall, but of course we know just how terrible of how they just can't get anything going in the first quarter. His stats in the first quarter this year: 53 of 67, 756 yards. Completion percentage of 80 or 79.1, so almost 80%. 11.28 yards per attempt, 7 touchdowns, no interceptions in the first quarter. So they get off to fast starts. And I could say, and we ask ourselves, can he bring that style of offense to the SEC? If you bring a style of offense in the SEC where you're getting up on teams early, it gives a big advantage.
Yeah, and how many stats did you say, how many passing yards did you say they had in the first quarter so far this year?
756.
Okay, because I'm looking here. Florida's got 1160 for the year. So they're getting almost as much in the first quarter as Florida is in all 4. I think there's something here. The guy I think he played under Bill Walsh at Stanford for a short time before transferring to Nebraska.
Before transfer, yep.
I don't know if you mentioned Monty Kiffin.
Yep, I did. Yep.
Then Parcells, like you did mention. I mean, it's just a tremendous pedigree.
On both sides of the ball.
On both sides of the ball. Has coordinator experience and, on both sides of the ball. Went out to Chip Kelly, brought the elements that we'd like to see in Florida's offense. And he recruits Florida at a high level. I mean, he's a young guy, he's energetic, he's well-liked. This is checking a lot of boxes for me. The only one it's not checking is that he hasn't had a lot of experience as a head coach. That said, I think if Florida doesn't pony up the bucks for this guy and try to lock him down, somebody else will. I think that he's going to end up at a big program. There's a Nebraska factor there. He was, quarterback of their offense. He might want to go home. And I'm not like one of these guys that's like a homer that says, oh, Florida's the top job in the country just because it's, in Florida. I think there is something to be said for schools that maybe have an easier road to championships. It's just a pure employment opportunity. But Nebraska just doesn't seem like one of those to me. It seems like it's going to be a very tough pull in recruiting. It's going to be a tough place to really establish yourself as an elite coach. And given Florida's circumstances right now, how can you not look at that and be like, I have the opportunity to go into a school like Florida with its tradition, with its resources, its recruiting grounds, and their current situation struggling so mightily on offense. If he were to turn them around, he'd be a nationwide rock star. He's on the verge of that now, but it would be off the charts. So I don't want to say he's the most likely candidate, but he's the one that of the less established guys, he's the one I'm hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think he's the next home run, like he's the next big guy. So it'd be nice if he just slid just about an hour and a half up the road and slid into Gainesville there. A couple more stats from his quarterback here. As I mentioned, Mackenzie Milton in the red zone, 19 of 31, 139 yards, 61.3 completion percentage, 7 touchdowns to 1 interception in the red zone. So, look at there. I mean, 7 touchdowns, and he has 2 rushing touchdowns. So he has 9 total touchdowns in the red zone just himself there. So, I mean, he has many touchdowns in the red zone as Florida has all season. 3 more.
I think there's nowhere to go but up, Dave.
That's true. And just looking quickly at the running back, too, because, this is a full offensive package here. Adrian Killins Jr., 53. This is their leading rusher, by the way. So 53 attempts, 430 yards. He's averaging 8.1 yards a carry.
Is that good?
8 yards a carry.
Dave, they're averaging just under 8 yards a play. Just under a first down on every play. I mean, it's absurd.
And we know this is it's the AAC.
It's not the SEC.
It's not the SEC. But you know what? The AAC has gotten a pretty good reputation of being, you have your Power 5 schools, and they throw themselves. And granted, it's self-promotion, but they call it a Power 6 because they've had some big upsets. They've competed with some big teams out of that conference lately. So it's not a pushover conference by any means.
No, and like we talk about Fuente, his success from Memphis translated right over to Virginia Tech. So, hey.
I mean, hey, look. I mean, I'm not to compare, and I hate to do that, but I mean, these were a lot of the same things we were saying about Urban Meyer when he was coming in. All that offense won't work in the SEC. It did.
Well, the SEC is ripe for change from an offensive philosophy standpoint. We've seen what Auburn, and I know they've had their own struggles, but they've tried to implement it. Florida had success, years ago with it. Even Alabama now is changing things up a little bit. I just think that I just think you're going to see continued movement towards spread and option going into the league. That's what I think.
Yeah. So, as me saying, I don't think Fuente can be the guy. I think he's at Virginia Tech. So ultimately, Scott Frost he's easily my number 1 guy.
He is, and. I don't know that it will happen. Maybe he does want to go to Nebraska. Maybe somebody else swoops in. I kind of don't think Tennessee is going to want to get involved, the head-to-head for the guy. And they're a few weeks behind now, it looks like. The guy that, is really the dark horse here that, we've heard the most chatter about, and a guy that I'm really not ready to feature too much on this show because I want to kind of give him more attention as we move forward is Mike Norvell. He's the current head coach that took over for Fuente at Memphis. Looks like a much better recruiter. Like I talked earlier about how Fuente had struggled at Memphis to recruit. And then so instead of those 10, 11, 7 foreign classes, Norvell put together 3rd best class in conference. And then now he currently has the 2nd best. He's got a reputation as a dynamite recruiter, as an innovative offensive mind, is one of maybe the best offensive minds in the country. I think he's one of the youngest, if not the youngest head coaches in the country at like 36 or 37 years old. And he's got Memphis in good position. He's 6-1 right now after starting off 8-5 last year. So he's a guy that very well could sneak into the picture and become the guy.
Yeah, I like him a lot as well. A lot of people, since they're in the same conference, they want to bring up the Central Florida-Memphis game where Central Florida blew them out. But I don't think you can really I wish it was that easy, and you could say Frost is the much better guy because of the game they played head-to-head. But, I I don't think it's that easy. But
Yeah.
and the big question is, when you look at it, is he using the success off of Fuente? But you mentioned the recruiting. Now that would have to be because Fuente was a good identifier of talent. Because as you're saying,
Yes.
Norvell, if you go by stars, he has the higher ranking of players he's bringing in. So is it the good players that Fuente identified that are still there, or is it more Norvell inserting? And we have to go and break down the roster and see how many guys are freshmen and sophomores compared to
Right.
to that. But I like what I've seen from his style of offense and how fast they get going.
Yeah, all these guys are running, for the most, except for Taggart, are running wide open offenses that are tossing the ball around. I mean, Frost is going to have a little more option than maybe Norvell would. But both of them, between Frost and Norvell, they're both, for their careers, averaging around 22.0 and 22.1 seconds per play. And again, that's just far faster than Florida's here. If either one of those were the guy, you're going to see a much more up-tempo offense.
Yeah, and I'd say he's probably like my second or third guy. I like him a lot too.
Yeah, I'm thinking Frost, Norvell, and Fuente are the three that I think will get the brunt of the majority of the focus here, and I think that's probably your most likely pool of candidates.
Okay. Quickly before we sign off here, Bill, did you have another guy? Was that it?
Not for tonight.
Okay.
As we move forward, we'll address the rumors as they pop up, I suppose, and kind of give you guys these more in-depth profiles of what you're looking at statistically, and get to know the candidates.
All right. So one guy I just want to ask you about. You don't have to dive into him.
Charlie Weiss.
Two guys. My bad. Lane Kiffin, Chip Kelly.
The Chip Kelly thing, there's a rule out there I was reading about, the SEC passed it, where if anybody has had a show cause or any kind of brand on them, like Chip Kelly has in NCAA infractions, where you've got major violations and that's put on you personally, like Chip Kelly has, the school that wants to hire him, the AD or whatever, has to go meet with the commissioner of the SEC. It's an extra layer of filtering, and they basically have to explain themselves and then what that does is it puts the school in the hot seat, because if they've done that and then the guy gets in trouble, it's going to come crashing down on the school. And so I really don't think Florida's going to mess with that. I just don't think that's their mode of operation. And as far as Lane Kiffin, the guy that I know of hasn't left anywhere pleasantly. He just has a stigma that I cannot imagine a school of the stature of Florida being willing to trust him at this point. I've had people reach out, and actually, I'm going to say that for after the show. People have reached out to me about Lane Kiffin and the possibilities of people that you might be surprised with are actually gunning for this guy to be the coach behind the scenes. I just don't see that happening. Not in a million years.
After what Florida just went through with Jim McElwain, I kind of agree. I don't think they character. Character is going to be a thing here. That's one thing I think we're kind of maybe overlooking, and we haven't really said a lot about. But I really think they're going to vet a lot of character flaws and all that. And maybe there are no flaws with some of these candidates, but I really think that is going to be part of the box that needs to be checked when Scott Strickland's going through his list.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here looking at Lane Kiffin's resume, man. He's coached for the Jaguars, been a head coach of the Raiders, the head coach of Tennessee, USC, the coordinator at Alabama. How did he get those jobs? I mean, he is a great coach. But
there you go. I was just about to say he is
a great coach.
His offensive mind is great, but you're right. You're getting baggage.
I don't see it. And you mentioned character, and I don't even want to disparage his character. I mean,
I don't think he's a bad guy. It's just he butts heads with the higher ups a lot.
And I think he came in way too young. He really did. He's still only 42 years old after all those jobs. I mean, imagine that, being the head coach of an NFL team, and between Tennessee and USC, two major top. And USC's got to be a top 10 program still, or top 10 job. Tennessee's top 20 easy. And then Saban's coordinator. He's got a long career left, and I think he just needs to spend probably 2 more good years at Florida International, then take a step and then probably another step to get back to a top 10 job. I just don't see it. But I mean, could it happen? I guess anything could happen.
Yeah, and I'm trying to find it, and giving Thomas some more credit here. He retweeted it, and it was something about Lane Kiffin, and he has just started. It's probably Lane Kiffin for you, but he started following some people with Florida connections. I believe he followed on Twitter. He followed Chris Rumpf,
Warfel,
and Vontrell Miller.
Yeah. And I think he's trolling there.
He is. So there you go. But that's part of what we're talking about. That's the kind of guy you would be getting.
That's something I would do, but I don't know that I'd be good head coaching material. Yeah, I that's the sure get. He's a jokester. I thought it was funny, but no, probably not. Let's just say that.
Yeah, probably not. He would not.
I don't want to be absolute about anything, man, because.
Well, I think we could be absolute. He would not be near top of the list.
I can't imagine. Yeah.
All right, Bill. Anything else, man?
No, man. It's good to be back on. It feels like we could keep going for another hour here, but I'm sure we'll have more to come soon.
Yeah, we had people requesting yesterday about an 8-hour show. So.
Well, it was fun, man, and thank you to all of us. All to support us.
Yeah.
Oh, and hey, thank you to Thomas Goldcamp and our friends over at GatorBait.net. We do recommend them. It's a good place to get information on the Gators and post. They have a great message board community over there.
Absolutely. Some of those guys were actually on top of everything that was happening Friday when the whole Jim McElwain thing, when that first started coming out. So, there was a lot going on, and those guys were on top of it, and especially on top of everything that happened over the weekend and making sure the information that was out there was right. So.
Yep. Yeah, I always enjoy reading their stuff, man. But, yep, it's going to be a busy week. I wouldn't be surprised at all if we had new names pop up in the next few days, and we'll definitely try to cover it as best we can.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you can find Bill on Twitter at RealBSykes. Give him a follow there. Our other co-host, Will Miles, he'll join me on Wednesday. You can read his stuff on SEC Country and find him on Twitter at Will Miles SEC. I'm your host, David Waters. This is Monday episode, so yeah, I'll be on the Bill King Show on Tuesday, so check it out there, either live or he usually tweets out a link. So I'll be on there talking about Jim McElwain, and Bill knows college football like nobody else. So getting his opinion out there when him and I go back and forth will be pretty big, and seeing what he thinks there. So remember, you can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. And guys and girls out there, thanks for listening to this episode of Gators Breakdown.